Helen Reddy burst onto the world musical scene with her hit I Am Woman, which became a feminist standard. It also made her Australia's first Grammy Award winner. Accepted abroad more than at home, she became an American citizen, although in recent years she's lived on Norfolk Island. And now she's received the ultimate Australian recognition by being inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. This week's Talking Head is Helen Reddy. Helen, it's great to have you on Talking Heads.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for having me.
You've always been a fighter after things.
Yes.
What's that about?
I've always had very strongly held beliefs, and one of them since a very early age was that women were not getting a fair go. And I determined, I think, very early on that I was going to live my life as if I were a man, that I was not going to let any of those restrictions hold me back, that women shouldn't do this or that or...
When you say early on, you talk about this being a revelation to you, even at the age of 4. What happened?
I was in Perth. My parents were doing a show there. And several of the comedy sketches bothered me because they were sexist. I mean, I wouldn't have called it that at the time. I didn't know why they bothered me at the time.
Even at 4?
Even at 4. So, you know, I did recognise exploitation when I saw it.
You're from a family of strong women too.
I'm from a family of strong women. And certainly, you know, in the era I grew up in, the 40s and 50s, women were encouraged to stay home and be dainty and feminine, whatever that meant. And when I looked at the women in my family, they all worked. They all kept house at the same time. They'd all had children. And, you know, certainly my grandmother had kept the family together through 2 world wars and a depression, despite the fact that she was married to a severely alcoholic man. So they were my role models, and yes, they were all strong.
Let's look back and see how you were shaped by your early years.
I was born in Melbourne on the 25th of October 1941. I was born during the war. There was shortages of just about everything. Those are my earliest memories. My parents, Max Reddy and Stella Lamond, they both came out of vaudeville, and in later years went into radio. But they, I think the stage was their first love, as it was indeed mine also, out of all the media. In 1946, just after the war ended, they went to Perth and they did a series of variety shows there. And so that's where I made my professional debut. I had a little smocked dress that I would wear, and I used to come on and sing the song. There were 27 babies at the baby show. My grandmother was very important in my childhood. She and my Auntie Nell, Mum and Dad would go out and do country shows. And so I used to stay with them quite often when my parents were on the road. My mother had been married before. She had been married and divorced, and my sister Tony was 7 years old. My father was always fascinated by American culture. We always had American magazines in the house. Everything was bigger and better and newer, and I thought, oh, I've got to go there and see all that. Becoming a star in America meant you were a star internationally, and I wanted a global career. I started doing shows on Channel 9 and Channel 2 and doing some nightclub work and so forth.
You're my world, you're every breath.
Then I made the mistake of getting married when I was 19, way too young.
You're my world.
We moved back to Melbourne and I had a baby. I had my little girl, Tracy. But by that time the marriage was over. The marriage ended during my pregnancy. I think I'd have a better chance of advancing my career if I were in Sydney. And my father, for my 21st birthday, had bought me a little Morris Minor. My daughter was about 16 months old, I think, at that time. And off we went to Sydney. And it was a long, hard struggle. I was just squeaking by financially. And this contest was being run on Channel 9.
Time to meet the second contestant this week in Phillips Bandstand Starflight International. From Sydney, Helen Reddy.
First prize was a chance to go to New York and record there. Second prize was a recording contract in Australia. And ultimately, I did win. It's still one of the highlights of my life when I look back on that moment. Tracy was 3 when I left for New York.
Sometimes it feels like you and me against the world.
And of course, absolutely nothing happened. Somebody from the sales department took me to lunch and said, "Have a nice time while you're here in New York, dear. Don't forget to call us and say goodbye before you go back to Australia." And that was that. There was no recording contract, there was no recording, there was nothing. And of course, I'd come to stay. So here I am, I'm virtually stranded in New York with a little girl and nothing.
You and me against the world.
I was in the United States for 5 years before I actually had my first success.